welcome to another episode of the Ostrich Technique podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ananth.
And I am Chris.
Yeah, so we were initially planning on doing a full episode of our Marvel rewatch for Incredible Hulk, and then, of course, this little movie comes along called Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, a humble little indie film, wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yep.
That it came out and taking the world by storm, had a pretty big opening, and we both loved it. So kind of like how we did with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, we figured it'd be good to do a mini episode of sorts and just discuss our thoughts on it, give a quick rundown of everything, and just, I guess, take it from there. So, yeah, I mean, Chris, anything to add there, or should we just jump right in?
Now let's jump right in.
Yeah, so Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is, of course, a direct sequel to the 2018 critically acclaimed film Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This film is, I mean, for me, this was, Chris, coming into this one was my most anticipated movie of 2023.
Yep.
And I mean, the animation style, everything looks so good. And I'm so pleased to say that this movie really lived up to all of my expectations, hopes, and it honestly surpassed them in some ways. It's pretty incredible. And also, I guess up top, for anyone who's listening, obviously this is a full spoiler discussion of this movie. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, I don't know why you're listening to this podcast. I don't know if you want to hear all the spoilers from us before watching the movie. I guess that's your prerogative, but it's full spoilers here. But yeah, I absolutely love this movie, and I mean, I can go through every. I mean, there's so many things I liked about this movie. I mean, the visuals, of course, were just unbelievable, which I'm sure anyone who comes out of this movie would probably agree with. I'm sure you do too, right, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible visual effects and art.
Yeah.
I mean, I know some people might, I don't know, maybe get maybe a little dizzy or because there's a lot of different colors and flashes things going on, but
Mm-hmm.
it is so stylistic and it is phenomenal what these VFX artists have done.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, this movie is art, honestly. It really surpasses the I think just being animation, and it really is just absolutely stunning to look at. I mean, there's so many just beautiful moments in this movie, like the scene where Miles and Gwen are sitting upside down and talking, and seeing the cityscape of New York. I mean, that shot, I wish I could get a 4K wallpaper of that. I'm sure it'll come out eventually, but it was just absolutely beautiful. I mean, you could probably pause any frame in this movie, quite frankly, and it would really just be an amazing, like, background or a poster or anything. Like, everything just looks so good. I mean, I won't go on and on about it. I mean, there's a bajillion reviews out there on the internet talking about how amazing this movie looks, and rightfully so. I mean, the artists really just did incredible work on this. But yeah, I mean, the visuals, of course, is just one aspect of this movie, but the story, of course, the themes, the script, everything about this is really just from top to bottom so well done here. And I guess this is where we disagree a little bit, Chris. I know we saw the movie together, and we came out of this movie having different opinions on how complete the story felt. I guess we can get to that point a little bit later, but I think the overall story. What did you think about it, Chris? Because I can obviously go on and on about this.
Yeah, overall story, it's pretty spectacular.
Haha, I see what you did there.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be here all week. It's a great story. It's a good evolution of Miles' story in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
But the way they write it, they give all the different characters their own sort of journeys and arcs.
Yeah.
In a really good way, and I think the writers did a really good job balancing out all those stories and also just kind of interweaving all of them into one cohesive plot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really interesting because this movie, I think, it really encapsulates everything that's great about Spider-Man. And I know Spider-Man is one of my favorite superheroes. I don't know about you, Chris. I would imagine he's probably up there for you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like most people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Spider-Man is such a great character, but I think it really the story just encapsulates everything that I really like about Spider-Man, just stepping up and taking responsibility when everything is against you, like the entire world. Like I mean, for Miles, he's dealing with his own personal life in the beginning of the movie, uh, with school and weighing the responsibility of his family life as well, along with being Spider-Man. And then when he gets to the actual Spider Society, having to basically deal with the entire weight of the Spider Society shunning him for the most part, and in the face of that, still standing up and facing it head on, and basically outwitting them, which is pretty incredible considering he wasn't deemed worthy enough to be part of the Spider Society. Is again, just really speaks to the underdog nature of Spider-Man as a hero and as a character. And just, I mean, I love this movie. Even the story itself just is, again, how Spider-Man is, or Miles Morales in this case, is really dealing with wanting to be kind of like the Spider-Man that he saw from the first movie, trying to live up to Peter B. Parker, Gwen, Spider-Ham, Spider-Man Noir. And again, when he's ultimately shunned by everyone in the Spider Society, and particularly aggressive way and serious way by Miguel, it ultimately untethers him from all of those expectations. And he literally says, I'm going to do my own thing. And that's when he really takes control of his own story. And I think for me, that was just, it really works, this movie, on so many levels. Yeah, I mean, anything to add there, Chris? Sorry, I went on for a bit
No,
there.
no, no. You go ahead, go off. No, I agree with your points. I think it's everything you mentioned about what Spider-Man stands for. Kind of what Miles is going through. It really works, and I'm just really excited to see the conclusion, and how all of his story wraps up. Come March.
Oh yeah. No, I cannot wait till March 2024. This movie, it cannot get here fast enough. I am desperately hoping this movie does not get delayed, though. I mean, if they need more time to make it, and if it's going to be as incredible as the first two were, then I mean, I'll be a little bit upset about it. But take the time you need to make the third movie just as good as you need to. Um, yeah, I mean, I think one other interesting thing about that whole story of Miles being rejected by the Spider Society, I actually saw Dan Murrell's review on this. Chris, I don't know if you had a chance to see his review on YouTube,
Mm-mm.
but he was talking about how it's almost kind of a meta commentary, the whole Miles being rejected bit, because it kind of mirrors how, like, when Miles was introduced in the comics, he was also like pretty thoroughly rejected at first by a lot of the Spider-Man diehards, since he wasn't Peter Parker, or I mean, maybe not like a white dude like he always has been in the comics. And the fact that Miles is, I mean, now he's arguably one of the most popular iterations of Spider-Man. Not that there are so many of, I mean, there are.
I mean, this movie
There are a lot
literally
of people.
showed
Yeah,
how many Spider people.
yeah, exactly. But like amongst the main, I guess, names of Spider-Man, I would argue that probably Miles is right behind Peter Parker at this point now. Like, I mean, he's definitely above like Spider-Woman, Spider-Gwen. I mean, Spider-Gwen is also up there definitely thanks to these movies, but like Spider-Woman, Mayday Parker, who also was introduced here, Ben Reilly, all of the various iterations of Spider-Man. I would say probably Peter and Miles are one and two. I mean, would you agree there?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would
So
agree.
yeah, and I mean, I think part of that is also just Miles. Again, the comics I believe did really their own thing, and Miles is a completely different take on Spider-Man than
Hmm.
Than Peter Parker. So
Yep.
just just a great story. Again, works on multiple levels, but yeah, and I think you also touched in your story bit about the characters, and that's another bit I just really liked. How even though you don't spend a ton of time with everyone, everyone still feels like they have their own worlds and are so fleshed out, and that you could probably make a movie or a TV show, or like you could expand very easily on any of them. So like Miguel, there's so much material there that was they seeded, but you could, I mean, they didn't explain everything, but you really got what you needed, and
Hmm.
you could definitely explore more. Peter B, you got more of his life, which was he obviously great to see him after the first movie. Spider-Man India, Pravitra Prabhakar, he was awesome too. Hobie, of course, everyone I think is coming out of this movie having a real appreciation and love for Spider-Punk or Hobie. I mean, are there any characters to you that stuck out, Chris?
I mean, I think the big one is Gwen had a much bigger role in
Oh
this
yeah.
one. It was really good to see kind of her background, because we have all of these Spider Men,
Hmm.
um, so we kind of know the story of like how all of those go. But from at least a female perspective, it was quite different. To see Peter Parker is not the superhero in this one,
Right.
and at least her dimension. So it was really interesting to see like how her Peter Parker met his demise, and how she still kind of went through all, not all, but she went through some canon events, which you know haven't really seen in you know movies or Spider-Man movies.
Yeah.
So I think it was a really cool take to see her and give her the chance to shine. They opened up the movie with Gwen,
Yeah.
which I really liked.
Hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. I think Gwen's story, I mean, she has such a great character arc in this movie where she is such a loner and basically trying to do everything on her own. And her arc is really just opening up and letting people in. Because by the end of the movie, when she's going to try and find Miles and save him, she literally assembles her own crew of spider people, of course, with the people from the first movie, like Spider-Man Noir, Spider-Ham, Penny, and Hobie. I think is also no, Hobie wasn't in there, but Pavitra was in there as well.
Was Hobie
And
not in there?
I don't think he was. Um, yeah, I don't recall. Maybe it requires a rewatch, but I don't recall seeing him in that final shot of them walking into the alternate portal that they made. But I mean, regardless, I mean, he's probably in their group in spirit and will probably show up in the next movie again, just because he is clearly an important figure in this whole story here. But yeah, I mean, Gwen just had a great arc, and I mean, I want to touch back again on the visuals here, but the visuals of her
Her
version
dimension?
of Earth were
Yeah.
just amazing. Just how the world changes and adapts, like the colors based on her emotions, were just super cool. Like
Hmm.
when she's hugging when she's dealing with her own problems, and then her dad comes in and she gives her a hug, or she gives him a hug. The colors changing to become more warm and inviting behind her was just, it was such a nice touch.
Yeah, and just at least the style for me for that, it just reminded me of kind of like watercolor paint hitting the paper and kind of just
Mm-hmm.
s- you know separating out, moving outwards from the center, things that, yeah, like you said, kind of opening up, warming. It was just a great touch.
Yeah, and every character had that lovely, their own unique art style. Of course, I think Hobie was the big,
Yeah, yeah.
the showpiece of that. And I mean, I've been reading articles about how, I mean, Hobie was his own technical marvel, where each piece of his clothing was animated at a different frame rate, which is just incredible. But different discussion. But basically, the art is just incredible in this movie, and the art is in service of the story, which is, I mean, just makes it even more
Hmm.
impactful and interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think going back to the characters, I think maybe a bit overlooked or underrated aspect of or characters would be Miles's parents.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, the first movie, it was much more of Miles' relationship with his dad, but here we get to really see that dynamic between both of his parents,
Hmm.
and how their parenting style is, and it brought out a lot of humor, whether it was intentional or not.
Oh yeah.
And you really see, like, it's funny how his dad is the cop, and you really think he's like this big patriarch, and then you see him interacting with his wife in this one, and you realize, he's a bit of a soft. He's a little afraid of her,
Oh yeah.
which is, I thought was a really, really fun dynamic. And I'm glad they really, really, you know, shine the light on that parent dynamic.
Oh, for sure. I think the big trap that sometimes these coming of age stories fall into is that the parents are typically just set as an obstacle for the child or the adolescent, where their whole goal is to try and sort of circumvent them or get around them, which Miles is obviously trying to do to some degree, but it's not because his parents are just there to act as an obstacle for the sake of being an obstacle or for the sake of the story to try and push Miles forward. Their I guess resistance to Miles being the way he is or being so closed off to them is in service of their own characters. They're real people with their own complex emotions, and they're clearly protective, and they're just trying to look out for Miles. And I think you really got that in that conversation outside Miles's room, where they were really just trying to figure out how to talk to him and how to get him to open up and just deal with him. And I mean, those are the sorts of quiet moments in the movie that even when it's not full of action and spectacle and like incredible visuals, the movie still has you really hooked. And
Hmm.
again, it's really one of the reasons why the movie works so well. Apart from just amazing visuals and good stories, they really focus on the characters, and everything is really focused around them, which is just amazing.
Yeah, and I'd like to use the parents to kind of transition to the next part, but
Hmm.
before I do, um, I do think Jessica Drew, Spider Woman,
Yeah.
was also a really fun character. Almost a standout. Not as much as Spider Punk, but I thought she was
Right.
a really fun character. Added some spunk.
Hmm.
And again, serving as a mentor to Gwen.
Yeah.
Whereas I guess in the first one you had Peter B. Parker serving as the mentor to Miles. Now, kind of, you see that foil or that kind of reflection of, okay, now Gwen is getting her mentor.
Yeah, yeah. I do wish we kind of got a little bit more of Jess in this movie. I
Hmm.
feel like she was maybe the one character I wanted to learn a little bit more about. We obviously got little bits and pieces from
Hmm.
her, but of course this movie had so much to juggle, so I'm not really going to
Yeah.
hold it against them for not having the space or the time to really flesh her out. But I mean, even what we got of her, I would agree that she really was. And I really didn't think about it that way, where she was actually serving as a foil to Peter B. Parker
Hmm.
and serving as Gwen's mentor, which was a nice touch. I hopefully they'll show a little bit more about what Gwen actually learned from Jess,
Hmm.
as opposed to just her telling Miles how we got it sort of an offhand comment while they were swinging around that, oh, I've learned so much from her.
Hmm.
But yeah,
But yeah,
one character that
oh,
we also didn't touch on. Sorry, I don't want
yeah. Go
to
ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
deal with it. Was the villain, of course, Spot.
That
We
is actually where I was going with the transition.
Oh, perfect. Well, I guess I read your mind there, but yeah, no, Spot was. Oh man, it's what a great transition from being this really goofy villain, and he has a great introduction even as a goofy villain, but he really becomes super menacing. And I know that I pointed this out to you, but it's really interesting how he has basically the same arc as Electro from Amazing Spider-Man 2, where he's sort of this goofy scientist that everyone overlooks and has this accident and is basically shunned by everyone, and in doing so basically makes him even more of a threat. But of course this movie just does it so much better and really gives respect to this almost like a D tier villain in the comics and makes him just this really formidable threat to Spider-Man, especially leading into this sequel. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder there, but go ahead on your thoughts on Spot.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really great. Like you mentioned, it like almost a D tier villain,
Yeah.
and especially one that seemed kind of goofy looking.
Mm-hmm.
And they make him this real like threat, and you feel the the real impending doom from him. Also, like his theme. like his theme music, it is unsettling. And some of the shots with Spot are really unsettling.
Oh yeah. No, I
Oh,
the way they drew him is
yeah.
really really well done. Again, going from the really sort of goofy, like almost Dalmatian looking
Hmm.
character design to becoming basically the embodiment of like darkness and chaos, essentially, with the all the lines sort of going around him
Yeah.
and swirling around. He was genuinely, I mean, it was a scary image to look at. It's actually pretty cool how they again pulled that off because he's obviously a 3D character, but he looks like a 2D drawing, which is
Hmm.
again again going back to the art always, but
Yeah.
it's he just really is well all of the art for him and all of the characters are just so well realized
Yeah.
and again really serve to accentuate what they're trying to bring out from each of those characters.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Um, and even I mean even Spot, like you kind of alluded to, he has a character arc as well, similar to
Mm-hmm.
Electro but done better. Um, and his first appearance, you see him, he's in like code, a top hat or whatever, trying to struggle stealing money out of an ATM.
Yeah.
By the end of it, he has learned how to wield his new powers. Um, and is literally looking to go kill, Miles' father. So it's gotten really dark over the film, but
Yeah.
Spot, like even played by, you know, I guess an actor who didn't really necessarily think he was gonna, move on to the sequel and have this bigger role,
Mm-hmm.
having that sort of, I don't know. To me, it didn't seem like a very non-threatening voice, a bit of a more
Yeah.
comedic voice.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. Jason Schwartzman is
yeah,
not the person that comes to mind when you think of menacing and scary, you know?
yeah. So like, I think it's a really cool juxtaposition.
Yeah.
And especially to retcon, who's the scientist at Alchemex, got a bagel thrown at him. Kind of funny
Yeah.
origin story, and then
It's one of those retcons that actually I think works really well. And this movie does it a
yeah,
couple of times, both with the history of Miles supposedly not actually being the Spider-Man.
hmm,
According to Miguel, he shouldn't have been Spider-Man. And then again, the retcon with the scientist who got bageled in the first Spider-Man being Spot. I mean, two retcons that actually really
yeah,
make sense and work well. But I also want to touch back quickly on your point on the voice actor.
hmm,
So I mean, Jason Schwartzman, obviously one of the voice actors, but all the voice actors did such a great job. And I'm again, I don't want to belabor the point, but they were all great. I mean, Shamik Moore, Haley Steinfeld, Jake Johnson, um,
Oscar Isaac,
Oscar Isaac, Issa Rae.
Issa Rae, yep,
Everyone was great. Everyone, Brian Tyree Henry, Lauren, I think that's her name, Lauren something Velez was the lady who voiced Rio Morales. Whoever voiced Rio Morales also did such a great job. But
yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I think one thing we both agreed on that was done really, really well
Hmm.
was the explanation of the multiverse and canon events.
Oh yeah, I think it was such a unique take on the multiverse to explain it with canon events and actually pulling in from all of the Spider-Man media essentially. They were pulling from the movies, they were pulling from the television shows. I mean, they pulled from Spectacular Spider-Man, which is I mean, made me the happiest man in the world because that's one of my
Yeah,
favorite uh, iterations of Spider-Man in media ever. So and I mean the fact that they were able to pull all of that and contextualize it in this way of canon events was so cool.
yeah, and at least I didn't really recognize like how. I mean, obviously the uncle dying, usually Uncle
Hmm.
Ben, but usually, I when I was watching Into the Spider Verse, I never pieced that together. Of it's Uncle Aaron,
Yeah.
who's essentially Miles's Uncle Ben.
Hmm.
Um, so pointing that out in this movie was really cool for me to like for it to click, and maybe I'm just a bit slow, but yeah, like the whole police captain dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's how kind of the parents serve a real purpose in this.
Hmm.
Jefferson or Jeff, he serves a real purpose of being in this movie. Just besides just being the the parent or the obstacle, like we were mentioning that these parents do not serve as. Um, but going back to the point, these canon events are analogous to, I guess, the absolute points in time that the MCU has kind of defined.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's just done much better than however it was explained in Multiverse of Madness.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, I think, I mean, there's been a lot of multiverse content coming out off late in movies and television. Like, I mean, Everything Everywhere All at Once, a bunch of the MCU movies and TV shows. But I really think that this one explains it the best, and it's explained in a pretty simple way overall. It's not, I think, overly convoluted, and
Hmm.
they aren't trying to, and it isn't used, I think, as a crutch where it's a way to escape consequences and responsibility, which I think sometimes is what Marvel, or at least the MCU in particular, has been falling into the trap of. Where in this case, the multiverse is very much a consequence and reflects the consequences of the actions of the characters. So like what happened in Into the Spider-Verse with Jason Schwartzman's character, or Alchemax in general, pulling out that spider from Earth 42, having the consequence of that universe having no Spider-Man, and perhaps the world falling into that sort of doom and gloom that we see at the end of the movie. And basically each of the universes dealing with the ramifications and consequences, and impacting characters in those ways. It's not like just going to a different universe basically absolves you of any decisions or any weight
Hmm.
to what you do, which I think also lends to why the multiverse in this works really well.
Yeah, I think this is probably the best depiction of the multiverse out of all the movies or shows that I've seen so far.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I also hinted at this point in the beginning of our talk here, but I know, again, the you and I differed a little bit, or disagreed a bit, on the nature of the story feeling complete here, or
Hmm.
this movie feeling like a complete movie.
Yes.
So why don't you go first? Why don't you share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is very clearly a part one to a
Oh yeah.
two-parter.
Hmm.
Um, so I still got that sense, maybe not as much as something like Dune, where Dune Part One, I just felt like nothing. I just felt like it was a setup. Whereas this, it does definitely feel like a story, but I don't feel satisfied yet because the resolution is not there. It ends on a cliffhanger.
Right.
Um, so me, like you're going to argue, each of these characters have their own arcs in the movies, and the arcs are complete in the movies.
Hmm.
Where I guess the overall arc for all these characters may not necessarily be. At least the plot is not complete.
Right.
That for me, I want to feel that that plot is finally complete.
Hmm.
So while it doesn't necessarily feel like a complete, at least a resolved movie to me, I still think it is a really good movie, and I will agree with you. Some of the character arcs are complete by the end of the film,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
yeah, just to me, I just don't feel like it still feels a little bit too much like a part one to something.
Yeah, and I think maybe part of that is also, in the messaging that this movie had. Maybe they wanted to, end it with a sort of surprise that it's a part one, because obviously you and I follow the media closely and follow media news, so we knew that this was a part one going into it.
Yep.
But I know in our theater, especially some of the young kids that we heard in our theater, when they showed the to be continued bit, we heard a pretty audible groan in the audience, because I think everyone was hoping that there was going to be more to the movie or something.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think I agree in the sense that the story is incomplete, but I think that's inherent to the idea of it being a part one. I think for me, the overall narrative that they were trying to tell from point A to point B, it did feel complete in that sense, in that, again, in terms of characters, that felt complete to me. And I think that's really what this movie was trying to do in terms of completing a section of a character arc.
Yep.
And, Miles going from someone who wants to be recognized as a Spider-Man to really being his own Spider-Man, and Gwen going from someone who's afraid to work with other people or open up to her dad to, on the flip side, opening up to her dad and then letting people in and actually realizing the value of that. I mean, those are obviously the two key character arcs in this story,
Yeah.
but I think that in that respect, for me, I didn't feel unsatisfied coming out of the movie. Obviously, I'm still hungry for more, which is, I mean, they left us on a cliffhanger, which is why I really
Yeah.
want to, I can't wait for March. But I didn't have as much of a problem with it feeling like a part one.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fair. Um, yeah, I mean, it's just personal opinion.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Of
But
course.
yeah, I mean, to me, a film like Infinity War, where it is a part one to two part, story. Infinity War itself felt like a complete movie on its own.
Hmm.
It can stand alone by itself and not need the sequel. Whereas this movie, I feel like I can't give it a full honest review or rating without seeing the second one, because it just feels like it's a sister movie that needs to be there.
Okay. I
And
mean,
that's just my that's just my
it's a
thoughts.
fair point. It's a fair point. I mean, this movie definitely. I mean, it's. I think the perceptions of this movie will be affected by how the sequel turns
Yeah.
out. I think more so than say Endgame would impact how Infinity War ended out. I mean, I think Endgame would have impacted it in some capacity, how Infinity War turned out, but I don't think that it's. I see the point that you're making. I don't disagree with it. I just maybe I didn't have as much of a problem with
Yeah,
it
yeah,
feeling
yep.
like a part one.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I think I mean we've gone through over 30 minutes of what we liked about the movie. I guess we should probably hit on if there was anything that we really didn't like. I guess we sort of touched on it with this feeling like a part one for you, but was there really anything else that stuck out?
Off the bat, I mean, I highly recommend a second viewing of this movie because they throw a lot at you.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, after just one viewing and letting it marinate for a few days, like really, there's not much that I can really think that I didn't like.
Hmm.
Besides, yeah, maybe that feeling of incompletion, but that's still not huge for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, a lot of people like, Metro Boomin on this, but there was no banger to the level of Sunflower on this.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I,
I
I,
think
w-
that's fair.
I would have liked another, like, you know, a hit like that.
Hmm.
But I mean, again, that's very minor, very, very minor.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. I was actually gonna. That's something I forgot to mention in my positives as well, and I'll touch on it briefly. Was the score by Daniel Pemberton was really good and just as good, if not better, than the first score that he did in Into the Spider Verse, and really hits on so many different kinds of music. Like in Mumbattan, really feels like he
Hmm.
really took a lot of Indian inspiration in there. And then, of course, a lot of the score for Spot, like you mentioned,
Hmm.
the score for Miguel really has that ominous tone to it.
Yeah,
Yeah, but and Gwen's theme also is really good. But basically, I mean, the score is incredible. So,
it's
um,
amazing.
the score is really good. The soundtrack, I agree, maybe not as great as the original Spider Verse soundtrack was.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think for me, in terms of negatives, yeah, I mean, I struggle to think of things that I really dislike about this movie. This movie was just, I mean, almost a perfect movie in my mind. I think the one thing that I picked up on, which was a bit of a nitpick more than anything, was in a whole society of Spider Men and women, I don't know if I agree with the idea that all of them would subscribe to Miguel's view of canon events.
Well, sorry, not to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree that I don't think all the spider people would subscribe to that ideology.
Hmm.
And that, to basically shun Miles because he is an anomaly. Um, like we don't see the MCU's, Tom Holland's Peter Parker. We don't see Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker. We don't see Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker in part of the Spider Society.
Right.
And I think it's likely that Miguel is only inviting people to the Spider Society that he knows would side with him. Like, I would think all three of those Peters would side with Miles.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
So,
I mean, but on the flip side, they are literally cited as people who have experienced canon events. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man and Tobey Maguire's
Yeah.
Spider-Man. So, I don't know. I think it's more just the idea that it felt a little strange that a Spider-Man or any of the Spider-Men would simply let events happen and not try and stop them. I mean, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, in Civil War, talks about the idea when you see bad things happen and you could stop them and don't, then the bad things happen because of you. I mean, I think that really encapsulates my thoughts on it, right? Like and maybe that's why Tom Holland Spider-Man isn't in this. Like he probably, I think, like you rightfully mentioned, I think he probably would subscribe to Miles' view on this, but I don't know if all of the Spider-Men, even in the Spider Society, would agree. And I mean, maybe that's why at the end they all sort of break away from it, like Peter B. and Noir and Spider-Ham and Penny
yeah.
and Gwen. Yeah, so maybe, I don't know. It honestly, it's a bit of a nitpick. It's not, I think, as important as the overall idea that, and I think part of it's also explained by the fact that, if they go against canon events, then literally their universe gets destroyed. So maybe that's enough of an incentive for them to sort of let things happen. But it's, it is kind of interesting that, like, no one's tried to, rebel against the system, kind of like how Miles is doing here. But
I mean, we don't know. We don't know if that's happened in the past, but yeah, from what we've seen, there's no mention of some sort of rebellion like that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I think that really covers it for me. Was there anything else you wanted to add here?
No, I mean, I think we went a little bit over what we expect in terms of time, but it is a big movie. But yeah, I think we've covered the main points, and when we get around to maybe doing a full episode, we'll dive a bit deeper.
Yeah, I definitely want to rewatch this movie. Like you said, I think this movie begs a rewatch. And yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen this movie, go see this movie, please. This movie deserves all the support it can get. Not that it's struggling, but it's just a really good movie. So it definitely deserves all the love and support. And yeah, and if you have seen this movie, go see it again. Honestly, I think it's definitely deserving of it. But yeah. I think that's it for me. And yeah, I mean, I love this movie, man. I love it so much. I really want to go see it.
Yeah, it's superior,
Haha, yeah, another good one. But yeah, that's, I think, it for us, guys. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.
See ya.